So, hello.
Hi, Carol. How you doing?
Okay.
Good.
So,
And here's Charlotte. Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi. I want to tell you I have to leave at 1:45.
Okay.
I just
Thank
want to
you for
let you
letting me
know.
know. I
Okay.
appreciate it. Ricky seems to be having some problems connecting. Hi, Maddie.
I finally made it on. Kept doing weird things.
I
I'm
had to
here
go into
now.
kind of a,
I just plugged in, White Meadow Temple June events, and then
Oh,
yeah, I
I
had
go,
a,
which
Oh.
one?
go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was
which
just
one
going to
did-
say, it didn't just automatically pop up on my Zoom screen, which is kind of weird, but I found it.
I always go to the weekly e-news. I keep it as new all week
Mhm.
long. And so I just go on that.
Ricky's having trouble, it seems.
I'll text her.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Susie.
Hi, Susie.
Hi,
How you doing?
Susie. I have trouble pronouncing this week's Parsha.
Beha'alotecha.
Yeah. Easy for you to say.
It was Seth's bar mitzvah portion.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Oh, you've told me that before. You'd think I would remember.
Yes. No, come on. Too
Well,
much
I
for you to
remember. I
remember all
remember
that.
things. My one of my cousins, his parasha was Vayikra. Oh, Ricky, finally you made it.
Sorry about that. I called my niece in Florida to wish her a mazel tov on graduating, and
Oh,
she
mazel
called me
tov.
as I was
That's
getting on.
oh, okay. So you know the expression that sukba mitzvah. No, why am I suddenly blanking on the phrase? Sukba mitzvah, patur mi mitzvah. When you're engaged in one mitzvah. Halsekba mitzvah, patur mi mitzvah. When you're engaging in
Okay.
one mitzvah, you're exempt from the
Right.
other.
I looked
Okay,
up.
so let me call up my screen as soon as I find all of the controls here. Okay, and I'll actually
Hello,
zoom in a little bit so everybody could see it. There we go. All right, that should be much better.
It is.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on in the parasha. Perhaps most importantly is Israel finally, after 2 years at Mount Sinai, begins its trek in the wilderness. And we have a number of other additional laws that are given and dealt with, again, lighting of the menorah, the chatzotzrot, shel kesef, the silver trumpets. We have additional senses. But then we have what seems to be a doubling. We had the story of the people complaining about food before, kind of a theme throughout the Torah. So we're going to take a look at one particular element. Already God's anger has lashed out at the people. We're in chapter 11. But now we're going to take a look at one particular incident. And in particular, one unusual, what I think is a very unusual statement in the parasha, but also just a couple of little things we're going to look at today. So who would like to read the biblical text? That's the top. Okay, thank you, Susie.
The riffraff in their midst felt a gluttonous craving, and then the Israelites wept and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remembered the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic."
Okay, so what are some of the things that stand out in these two psukim?
That they're
Well,
saying all these positive things about Egypt.
Yeah, you're talking about, oh God, it was so wonderful in Egypt. Really?
Right.
You know,
Right.
Well, it was
anything
2
else?
years. They start to forget.
That's true. That's true. They've
Bad
been out
things.
2 years. They've been living in the wilderness.
Plus, God also said that there are a lot of riffraff in the midst.
Well, that's right. The riffraff in their midst. It's a great Hebrew word, ha'asafsuf. And riffraff is probably the best translation. But now we're going to take a look at, first of all, who is this riffraff?
This was the mixed multitude that had gathered themselves unto them when they left Egypt.
Yeah, so if you remember, look down here in Exodus 12, 37 to 38, the Israelites.
The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 fighting men on foot, aside from non-combatants. Moreover, a mixed multitude went up with them, and very much livestock, both flocks and herds.
So very famous line that apparently there were a number of people that took advantage of the Israelites going out of Egypt. It's likely that the Israelites were not the only oppressed peoples in Egypt, not the only slaves. So this mixed multitude comes out. And again, so Rashi seems to say that this is the Asaf Suf is in fact the Erev Rav. And Ibn Ezra seems to agree. Go on, Susie. Here, the
Who were
riffraff.
gathered unto the children of Israel, but were not of Israelite stock. They are the mixed multitude, Erev Rav. The word is a doublet of 2 root letters. Compare Seharar with Hamamaru.
Yeah, they're just 2 examples of Hebrew words that seem to have doubled roots. Secharchar and Hamamaru. I don't know if he's totally right about all of that, but it's just Ibn Ezra pointing out the grammar. But again, both Rashi and Ibn Ezra are saying this Asaf Suf is really to some extent dealing with the Erev Rav. And if we take a look at the footnote at the bottom, also a modern commentator. Go ahead.
Milgram agrees with our traditional commentators. Riffraff, the rendering excellently conveys the assonance of Hebrew Asaf Suf. This term refers to the non-Israelites who joined them in their break for freedom, also called Erev Rav, mixed multitude. One rabbinic interpretation locates this riffraff at the edges of the camp, thereby connecting it with the preceding incident. The alien element, having been scorched by God's wrath for its complaint about the forced marches, now incites the rest of Israel to complain about the forced food.
Yeah, so again, it's referring to the narrative that immediately precedes this. So there seems to be a lot of agreement that this Asaf Suf is in fact this Erev Rav. Well, let's try and figure out a little bit more about this Erev Rav, this mixed multitude. It's, there's a bit of a joke because when you talk about someone before he has graduated rabbinical school, sometimes we talk about an Erev Rav, so it's, we sometimes make jokes about that. Okay, so again, we have Israel coming out of Egypt with this Erev Rav, this mixed multitude. And now we're going to get at least one perspective on this Erev Rav. Would somebody like to continue? This is for Rashi is commenting on another verse when God tells Moses to go down the mountain because the people have corrupted themselves after building the golden calf. So would someone
I
like
can
to
read
continue?
that.
Oh, okay, thank you, Ricky.
Your people have corrupted themselves. It does not say the people have corrupted, but you people.
Yeah,
The
it's
mixed
not
multitude.
shichet ha'am, but shichet amcha, literally your people. Go
The
on.
mixed multitude whom you received of your own accord and accepted as proselytes without consulting me. You thought it a good thing that proselytes should be attached to the Shekhinah. Now they have corrupted themselves and have corrupted others.
So what's Rashi in his commentary bringing out here about this Erev Rav?
That it was the people who were responsible for, bringing them in and, corrupting everyone.
Yeah, so or basically they're the ones who are corrupting everybody. So it's a view of this mixed multitude, which remember at this point, when we're talking about the Asaf Suf, the people are still at Sinai, but it means the Asaf Suf were also at Sinai, also receiving the Torah. So, we're going to get a kind of a different picture of proselytes or seeming proselytes or proselytization as we look at Rashi's source more in depth. This is from Shmot Rabbah. And again,
Hurry down, for your people have acted basely. The people is not written here, but your people. Moshe said, Master of the universe, from where are they, my people? The Blessed Holy One said to him, they are your people. While they were yet in Egypt, I said to you, I will deliver my ranks. My people, I said to you,
my
not
people
to make
Israel. In other words,
Israel.
they're trying to catch that the Blessed Holy One said, I'm going to bring out my people. And that implies going on.
I
according
said
the
to you
Midrash.
not to mix them with a mixed multitude, but you, humble and proper, said to me to always accept the penitent. However, I knew what they would do in the future. I said to you, no, but I acted according to your will. But it was they who made the calf, for they worshipped idols. They made it and caused my people to sin. Look what is written. These are our gods. These are
Yeah,
gods.
these are gods.
In not what is written.
Sorry,
Not
is
what
not.
is written. These are your gods, for the aliens who went up with Moshe. It is they who made it and said to Israel, these are your gods. Therefore, the Blessed Holy One said to Moshe, hurry down, for your people have acted basely.
So, what is the judgment on the Erev Rav here? What's God's attitude?
They made the Israelites, God's chosen people, sin.
Right. That somehow, and not only that, but that God knew it from the beginning. And
Well,
didn't
you would expect him to know it from the beginning.
well, right.
Right.
But Moshe, of course, he's going to bring out everyone. And it's interesting how they say you said, you who are humble and proper, the Hebrew anav kasher. Unfortunately, you can't say it, Ata shahayita anav kasher, amarti li le'olam mekablim mashavim. Always accept the penitent. Shavim, from lashuv, to turn. And, the assumption was that, these people are going to now turn to God. They're coming out with Israel. They're standing at Sinai. But God said, yeah. I knew this from the beginning. And that's why it says, your people have behaved basely. These other people that you brought up, they're causing the problem. And it's interesting, in our parasha, they caused the problem. They have this great desire for meat. And also, they're the ones who build the golden calf. So what kind of perspective do you get here on proselytes?
Rashi apparently didn't like the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get kind of this negative picture. And we have to say, if we're honest, that there are different pictures within our tradition about how we look at gerim. For now, I'm understanding them as proselytes. It could be a ger toshav, but for now, I'm looking from mostly the rabbinic perspective that sees them as proselytes. And we have these different pictures within our tradition, some very, very positive, and some here negative. I mean, I think I mentioned last week the famous line, Kashim Gerim al Yisrael. Gerim are difficult for Israel, Kedarvanim, like thorns. And one interpretation is, well, they never really accept Judaism. They become like a fifth column that undermines the people, which certainly is what is implied here. Of course, the other interpretation is they become thorns because they take it on wholeheartedly, and they are so committed that they embarrass the born Jews who don't take it so seriously. And Rabbi Zucker, I don't know what your experience has been, but in dealing with a lot of Jews by choice, the latter interpretation, I think, is often more correct.
It's been mixed, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But I've run into enough examples of those that you make the point. They become super Jews of sorts.
Yeah. But but then we have you mentioned last week the person that came to your Beit Din and said, "Yeah, I'm just converting for my mother-in-law," which on one hand was very nice that he cared about his mother-in-law, but sorry, that's not the reason.
Right.
Did you accept him?
I think what we're seeing here also, because I know also the Halabi community basically does not accept converts. Just that, nope, sorry. So, and Elena has become somewhat more liberal-minded about that, but the way she grew up, converts, nope, sorry.
Which communities
that are under pressure, I think, and I think Rashi can be seen as to a certain degree, even though it's before the Crusades and all the difficulties, but communities that feel under pressure are much more suspicious of somebody that wants to join them, it seems.
Yeah.
Sorry, which community did you say? What did you?
Halabi, the Jews of Aleppo.
Oh,
The
okay.
Jews of what?
Aleppo,
Aleppo.
That's
In
Syria.
Oh,
Syria.
The dominant Syrian community versus the Shamis.
Yeah.
The West
So
Damascus.
Okay, now wait, I have a question for you, Rabbi Zucker. This gentleman who said he was converting for his mother-in-law, was he accepted as a convert?
No,
Okay.
he was told you need to study a little bit more and you need to consider what are your reasons for.
Yeah.
It has to be you have to want to be and not just to please somebody else.
Yeah, and this is a bit of an issue, I would say, between the certain elements of Orthodoxy and conservative Judaism. Very often Orthodox conversions, they do not want the Jewish partner to study with the person going through the conversion process. They want to make sure the person going through the process is doing it for him or herself. Whereas very often we have the Jewish partners, and generally, in many cases, we make it a requirement that the Jewish partner support the non-Jewish partner and come to class with them. Sometimes they end up learning a lot more than the non-Jew. But yeah, I mean, it was a problem in my family where one of my cousins, he'd grown up Orthodox, and he was marrying a woman who was not Jewish, and he didn't want to come to shul and do all the stuff he had to with her. Which was, I mean, she did convert in the end. She's a fantastic person. She's just absolutely marvelous.
And I would say the same thing about my daughter-in-law. She not only converted, and Seth obviously took the classes with her, but then she took a Hebrew class, and Seth wound up teaching half the class because it was too big when they first went for the first time. The woman who was teaching it said Zelotov, and Seth, being that he understood that, said, "Why isn't this good?"
Yep. No good deed goes unpunished. He spoke up in class, and that was it.
Right.
So lest you think, again, I want to show two sides of our tradition in dealing with proselytes, but just to know that there is this very strong tradition of, not being so crazy about them. But here we have another one. This is Rashbam, Rashi's grandson, who is commenting on the line in the end of Deuteronomy and the blessings of the people. Who is reading? Ricky, you were reading?
Yes.
They finished this up.
Lover.
Mhm.
Okay. Lover, indeed, of the people, their hallowed are all in your hands. They followed in your steps, accepting your pronouncements.
Yeah, Af chovev amim kol kidoshav biyadecha. That it sounds like God loved the people who were devoted to him. We don't totally understand. Look in the JPS, it says meaning of Hebrew uncertain. But certainly God, Af chovev amim, lover of the people. And Rashbam interprets also
members of the Gentile nations, such as the mixed multitude whom Moses had accepted as converts, and who had done so in order to receive the Torah with Israel. Also they, the Blessed Holy One, loved and accepted them, and rested upon them, as it is written in this song, lover indeed of the people.
Yeah, so for Rashbam, it's the exact opposite of his grandfather and the Midrash, that God totally accepted these people because they came with Israel. They attached themselves to Israel. They attached themselves to the Torah, and that's a theme that kind of goes throughout Jewish tradition. I think it's probably a theme in many cultures, that you, on one hand, are suspicious of outsiders, and the other hand could be very, very welcoming of people who come to be part of the community, who come to share in the destiny of the community. And even in the Torah, you have different attitudes. Of course, they have a totally different notion of, they didn't have a notion of religion. There wasn't a sense of conversion in biblical times. But you have very often positive views of non-Jews in different parts of the Torah. In the book of Jonah, certainly the Israelite prophet is a jerk, but all of the non-Jews seem to be very pious people. The sailors on the ship, the people of Nineveh, And even in Second Isaiah, it talks about how non-Jews will become part of the Jewish people, and in fact will be accepted as priests, which seems odd since it's generally
You have to
it's
be
past-
born into the
you have to be
priesthood.
born into it, but so there, and as we talked about in terms of the Levi'im, they're a much more complicated identity, probably was true as well for Kohanim, but so there we have just a little bit about some attitudes toward proselytes, toward other peoples, that we have our rather insular and type of perspectives, but not always. Okay, now we're going to go back to the biblical text, and would somebody else read this text again? The Israelites journeyed.
I'll read.
Oh, wait, sorry, no. Sorry, here. Yeah, I'll read these two.
We read them already.
I know, we're going to read them again.
The riffraff in their midst felt a gluttonous craving, and then the Israelites wept and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic."
Okay. Again, what really stands out here?
Well, first they said,
Praise of
if
their
only
life.
we had meat to eat. And then they said, we remember the fish, and they list all these other things and none of them are meat.
And none of them are meat, right? And also, how did they talk about how they ate this stuff in Egypt?
It was free.
They didn't have to do anything.
Right, it was free.
Yeah,
And
but they had to do everything else.
right, they're all kind, when we read the stories of what the Israelites were going through in Egypt, this seems to be a very unusual statement. Oh, we remember the fish that we ate in Egypt for free. Like, what are you talking about? And so now we're going to take a look at how some of our commentators try and deal with this very, very absurd phrase. So first of all, Ibn Ezra. Carol, you were reading, go ahead.
Cheaply, as if we got it for nothing.
Yeah, so here, how is he resolving it?
Cheaply, chinam.
For a pittance.
Yeah, in other words, he's picking up on the fact that, what do you mean you ate it for free? Well, it wasn't really free, but it was like for nothing. So he's trying to fudge the language here a little bit.
Well, with this mixed multitude, were they also slaves, these Egyptians, or
Well,
whoever?
assuming they're
They
the
were
ones who would
slaves
come
too.
out with Egypt. I mean, come out of Egypt, they would also want to escape. And now we take a look at what Bechor Shur has to say that we used to.
That we used to eat free in Egypt, because they would not say to them, "In Egypt you will pay money to eat." And here they eat the manna without money. Therefore they said for free. Perhaps in Egypt the Nile watered the ground and the vegetables, and these products were like ownerless property.
So what is Bechor Shur? How is he trying to resolve this issue of his free food?
That one didn't have to pay, that it was a commonly available.
Right. That it was just really language that they used. It was not literally that this was necessarily free, but again, everything seemed to come to them in Egypt and now here in the desert. And especially, the Nile, we'll come back to this idea of what the Nile did, that, everything seemed to grow. It was plentiful. It was always there. So you really didn't need to go around. So both Bechor Shur and Ibn Ezra are trying to deal with this in kind of a logical way. We're going to, this is an unusual statement. what could the Bible have meant? And, well, they didn't literally mean free, but, it was like it was free. And, well, maybe it was free because this was just, you didn't have to buy it. It was all over the place. Now Rashi's going to take it Rashi based on Midrash is going to take it in a very different direction.
If you say that the Egyptians gave them fish for nothing, has it not already been said, "Be off now to your work, no straw shall be given you"? Now, if they did not give them straw for nothing, would they have given them fish for nothing?
So what's the
Okay.
argument here?
They were remembering incorrectly.
Yeah, like, what are you, nuts? When you think of what we experienced, if they wouldn't give us straw for the bricks, you think they're going to feed us? Come on. But Rashi, based on the Midrash, is going to come to a different conclusion. If this is not really talking free, what does lechinam, for free, mean? Go on.
It means free from the mitzvah.
Uh-huh. So now, what is this really talking about?
What mitzvot?
Yeah, it's free from it.
That
What are the mitzvot?
the Israelites liked their life in Egypt
Torah.
because they did not have all of the mitzvot.
Right, they didn't have
was
the
free
yoke
time.
of the commandments.
Right.
They could cook it any way they wanted, or
Could eat whatever they wanted. Remember, this is after Sinai that they're getting all this meat, and they want this meat, and it's like suddenly, yeah, but there are all kinds of things attached here. There are rules. So it's not so much they have to pay anything, but they have to live in a certain way. You have to deal with the mitzvot. You have to deal with the obligations of the tradition. So Rashi, also sensing this problem, chinam. Why? How can you talk about this stuff for free? Because they're not really talking about the food. They're talking about the people's spiritual lives, if you will. And that goes even further in the Talmud. Or I should say the Talmud already took it further, because the Talmud comes before Rashi. So here we have a discussion of this verse in the Babylonian Talmud, in the Tractate of Yuma, which mostly deals with Yom Kippur, but we see an argument here in the Talmud. Go ahead.
we remember the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt, Rav and Shmuel. One said, literally, fish, and one said, forbidden sexual relations.
Yeah, probably not an interpretation that you or I would have thought of in reading this verse. And mind you, is probably just as shocking for the rabbis as it was for us, in the sense that this is clearly not a pshat interpretation. This is clearly, they know they are reading into the text, but we also have to understand what they're reading into the text. And first of all, let's see how Rashi, commenting on the Talmud, comments on this line in the Talmud. Go ahead, Carol.
That were forbidden to them in the wilderness, and Daga is the language of sexual intercourse, as it is said, and may they be teeming multitudes.
That's part of the blessing to Jacob's sons, that the Joseph's sons that Jacob gives them, the Yidgu Larov, which is part of a very popular song today. So exactly. And so, you think this is a crazy interpretation, because Rav, we don't know who said what. It just is one said and one said, so we don't know which was Rav and which was Shmuel, but let's just for argument's sake, say that it's in the same order. So Rav said, yeah, it's fish. But, Shmuel said, no, it's forbidden sexual relations. It's a little off base there. And, it's not so off base if you play with the language, which the rabbis like to do. And now interpretation that comes within the Talmud itself. Go ahead. The one
who said fish, as it is written, that we ate, and the one who said forbidden sexual relations, as it is written, for free.
Yeah, this for free obviously is kind of a licentiousness. And, again, it's a weird word, and we ate them lechinam. What was really free in Egypt? They weren't free in Egypt. But, so there, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Rabbi Zucker, you're going to say something?
Free from the mitzvot.
Yeah, again, free from the mitzvot. So it becomes not simply a monetary or economic issue, but it's really the spiritual issue. What happens when Israel comes out of Egypt? And what happens when they come to Sinai? Suddenly, we talk about came out of the old.
When you think about it, it's not so totally off the wall, because when you go back to Kitisa and they make the egel, the Yakumu Litzahek. And Litzahek probably is, it's sometimes to make sport, but Yitzchak and Rivka were making sport when Avimelech realized that they were husband and wife. First case of voyeurism in the Tanakh.
Yeah. So it's, they know Tanakh. And, so they're thinking of this in a much wider perspective. Now, clearly they're talking about food. That's the pshat of the text. But for our rabbis, it's not just the pshat, or we might call the meaning of the text, but the significance of the text. What is, the meaning might be what the words say, or the contextual meaning, but the significance is what is the role it plays, or what are the values at play, what are the messages that are conveyed by this story. So all of them are dealing with this difficult phrase, lechinam. Okay, now moving back to the more logical explanations, let's go on to Abarbanel. Another volunteer can really.
I'll read.
Okay, thanks, Maddie.
We remember the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt. This was a possible answer to those who heard their crying, for they would say to them, "Why are you grumbling over not eating meat? Were you eating meat in Egypt?" Undoubtedly, they did not eat meat there because there they were poor and destitute, and the meat in Egypt was very expensive.
Yeah, so, why would they have said this? Because everyone would have laughed at them. Why? What do you mean we missed the meat that you ate in Egypt? What? You were having steak every night for dinner? Come on. It's I remember after I graduated, we had a president at Brandeis that was trying to make it even less Jewish. And they decided that they were going to serve pork and seafood in the non-kosher line.
Oh,
which they
God.
had never done. Even though, it was not kosher food, but they were going to serve this. And I remember one non-Jewish college official from another college saying, "Why is this necessary? They're going to start serving lobster Newburg in the dining halls? This is not what a school really can do." So, but they're just realizing this is ridiculous. They didn't eat meat. But interesting explanation that Abarbanel comes up with.
Therefore, they would say, in Egypt, even if we didn't eat meat, we would eat fish, for it was plentiful there from the waters of the Nile. We did not need money to acquire it, for we would take it free, without money, without price. All this because the Nile River would overflow and spread so that each one in Egypt would
That should be dig, yes, sorry.
dig a pit. It would be filled from the Nile, and when the river receded, the fish would remain in those ditches. In this way, we would eat them for free.
Interesting idea. That, but again,
What
first
fish?
of all, tied into the notion that because of the Nile, that provided certain things. And indeed, in the Nile Delta, that triangular area where the Nile splits, and that's still today, this day, a very rich area in terms of farmland, in terms of it being green. And in fact, if you begin to move east from the Nile in Egypt, and the Sahara begins, and the Sahara Desert.
That would be west.
West.
Sahara would be west.
Yeah, west, sorry, you're right. I meant west. You're right, because they're going to Africa, yeah. But it's amazing how it literally just begins. There's grass, and then there's sand.
There's nothing.
It's nothing. But it's very, very, certain areas were very, very rich. They were able to grow crops. And part of coming into Eretz Yisrael was that they had to depend on the rain. Suddenly it was not just, they didn't have to worry about anything because you had the Nile River. Now they had to depend on the rain. They had to depend on God, as it were. So it was a very different experience in Eretz Yisrael than in the Nile. And maybe some things in Egypt really were very, very easy. However, that's not the case. Not in the Midbar, not in the wilderness, and not necessarily in Israel. And now, another kind of logical answer from Shadal, Shmuel David Lutzato.
That we used to eat free in Egypt.
Sorry, did somebody
Really?
have a
Whoops.
question?
Just was put into context, 19th century, latter 19th century, Italy.
Yeah, he was quite a scholar.
Really free, for the Egyptians would provide for the Israelites in order that they could do their work. And they would feed them things that were found there very cheaply, like the fish of the Nile and cucumbers, etc.
Okay, so, it's just providing for your workers. And you don't even have to provide the best meals, you provide what is common. That was the fish from the Nile and these vegetables that I guess were easy to grow and cheap. So I have a logical explanation why they said chinam. But then, you could tell that Shadal is a much more modern commentator as he moves into a more historical explanation that I don't know if is correct, but it's interesting.
And so we find in the writings of Herodotus that on one pyramid in Egypt, it was written that the pharaoh that built it put out 1,600 coins for garlic, onions, and radishes to provide for the workers that built it. Herodotus also wrote that the Egyptians would not eat fish, from which it would be understood why they would give it to the Israelites.
Yeah. So two interesting historical kinds of interpretations. Of course, the first one, we apparently from a pyramid, it's clear that, an Egyptian pharaoh would feed his workers and provide for them. Of course, it is problematic that the whole period of the Israelites in Egypt was after the time of the pyramids. Pyramids were already built. So, we have this, vision in Hebrew school of the Israelite slaves building the pyramids. Well, no, they were already built.
The pyramids were built 1,000 years before Abraham was even a twinkling in Terach's eye.
Yeah.
But our ancestors didn't realize any of that.
Right. Yes. And you
Nor
know.
did Menachem Begin.
Yeah, it's modern archaeology, and I have no idea. And in fact, Shadal goes and say we really have to check into this much more carefully if he's right that the Egyptians didn't eat fish, and didn't eat it. Yeah, you guys take this.
I don't think so, because you see pictures of a lot of the tomb, the fancier tomb illustrations, certainly from the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom, of people fishing.
Yep. Now, there were other commentators who actually made the comment that part of the work that the Israelites did was bringing in the fish or taking the fish from the nets that were caught by Egyptian fishermen. So that was another explanation for why they ate for free. But so again, I don't know how accurate Shadal's comments are, but they certainly show a historical sensibility of what was going on and how do we understand, how can we explain something through that. That's why it's so fascinating to look at all of our different Mefarshim and see how they attack a text. Bechor Shor also fairly logically here, talking about the overflow. No, that was Abarbanel. He was 14th, 15th century, actually.
16th.
15th, 16th.
15th, 16th.
Right. Yeah, he was he was part of the exiles from Spain. And it's fairly okay, this is how the fish was prevalent. This is how the vegetables were prevalent. So, even back already in the 15th century, they're thinking in logical terms. And let me go back to Bechor Shor. Perhaps in Egypt, the Nile watered the ground and the vegetables, and these products were like ownerless property. And again, there's a sense of we have to know what was going on at those times. What were the conditions that allowed them to do this? So the strange word chinam, well, we ate this for free. For anyone who knows the Avengers, you and I have very different memories of Budapest. There are some people who have very different memories of Egypt. And, it really wasn't such a Gan Eden. But again, they didn't have to work for anything. They didn't have to do, well, they did have to work for it, but, things were provided for them. And this is a tremendous change that the Israelites have to learn by going into the desert and being prepared and really having a new generation that is going to go into Eretz Yisrael, because only the new generation will have been hardened to face what they're going to face when they have to come in to conquer the land. And overall, one could say that this is kind of a theme in a lot of religious literature. I mean, you have it could be a test, it could be a learning period. So you have Eliyahu who has to go into the desert. He runs away from Queen Izebel and King Achav, and he runs down south, and an angel provides food for him. And then he runs down to Sinai, but he has to go into the wilderness before he is strengthened by God to go back and fulfill his mission. Moshe, to some extent, he prefigures Israel in that he goes into the desert. He has to flee Egypt and go into Sinai. And then he is ready to come back. And of course, in Christian tradition, you will have that as well. Jesus, in one of the gospel accounts, has to go into the desert and be tempted. So, the idea of going into the desert and being tested and learning, that's very powerful. And frankly, if you take the novel Dune and now the movies, Dune is a desert planet. And the people who live, the native inhabitants, are hardened and strong and know how to live in this forbidding environment where the off-worlders really don't. And one of the characters, Muad'Dib, has to really live among the indigenous inhabitants, has to develop his skills. I don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't read the book, because it's really one of the great, great works of science fiction. And the latest version of the movie is pretty good. So, so that are a couple of details. Yeah, that was it. A couple of details from our parasha. First of all, just in this one little section about the people craving for meat and God's response. And we have this in this short section, first of all, the unusual word asafsuf, and that leads into a whole examination of attitudes toward non-Jews, attitudes toward converts. And by the way, it's not just the Chalavi community. Even the communities, Ashkenazic communities that would accept converts. I mean, I have to say that when I was growing up, I always heard about one of my friend's mothers. She's a convert. Well, no, she's a Jew because she converted. She's now Jewish. But there are still people in the community that would look, oh, she's a convert. Like, there's something wrong with that. And but then also this unusual word chinam, which seems to be totally ridiculous. But we see creativity of our mefarshim, both in terms of understanding the spiritual side of what's happening in this story, and more, by the way, about going into the desert, being tempted. They want to be chinam mina mitzvot. They want to be free of the mitzvot, but no. Part of coming into the Midbar was to go to Sinai. We no longer have all Malchut Mitzrayim. We no longer have the yoke of the kingdom of Egypt, but we have all Malchut Shamayim. We have the yoke of the kingdom of heaven. We no longer serve the Egyptian Pharaoh, but we do serve God. Any questions?
And if it's
Question.
a bit strange, one of the hallmarks in all, I guess, socio-political commentaries that slaves are noted for their sexual promiscuity. So it's not such a wild idea. So once the rabbis come up with hinam dealing with mitzvot, then it's going to go to sexual concerns as well.
And Susie, you had a question?
No, it was Carol.
Oh, Carol, sorry.
Yeah, grammatical question with this asafsuf. Would the shoresh be samach vei? And what would it be a root for? Sof? Like end? Or?
First of all, it's a noun.
Asaf?
Well, asafsuf is a noun, but it very likely is from the root asaf.
To gather.
To gather, people that were gathered.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if Milgram makes another comment about that. Let's quickly take a look.
Yeah, because the other shorishim that they mentioned were two-letter shorishes, like from the other words. So just wondering.
Just for an aside, my older brother also writes, David Zucker writes for the Torah.com, and a few years ago, he
Mhm.
wrote an article on the Erev Rav. So
Ah,
go to the Torah.com and I guess it's Parashat Bo or Bashalach and see what he has. Or just put in David Zucker.
okay. All right, let me stop sharing.
He is much more into Midrash, so it's gonna go that direction. Yeah.
No, but
So-
the Asaf makes sense. I mean, I was just thinking Samach Vei, the Aleph. Yeah, okay.
That's off to gather,
Yeah, that makes most sense.
Yeah, let me see what, can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let me see if Milgram makes a comment on that. There's a whole, Milgram has got like a whole article elsewhere on this whole chapter and the structure of the chapter. And, it points out, of course, the complaints that you have in Exodus and in Numbers are very, very similar. Fire of the Lord broke out, riffraff. Yeah, no, he doesn't say anything about the meaning of the word.
So the article is probably on Parshat Bo.
That
1238.
would make sense. Mhm. So, all right.
Well, Yasher
Yeah.
Koach.
Bruchim to you. And
Thank you.
I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And be well.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
Take
You
care. all.
too.
Bye-bye.
And stay inside,
Bye.
yes.
Oh, yeah. Avoid this, or just keep wearing your masks.
Yeah. Bye.